The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Lancashire once again. We're beginning another new district today. We've got 4 episodes to explore over these next couple of weekends in the district of Pendle, which is close to Burnley. It's been a while since I was in Burnley. Now this is witch country, and all 4 of these are going to be talking heavily about the Pendle witches. This is Roughlee Booth. Roughlee Booth, Rough Wood Clearing Shelter. This weekend and next we'll be tackling 4 parishes in a brand new district of Lancashire. Welcome everyone to Pendle, a cluster of 19 of them which sit to the north of Burnley. It's been a long time since I was there. I hope my car behaves itself this time. If you know, you know. The first 4 in the series all have the word booth in their name. Now, unlike Edale, which we covered in High Peak not long ago, the word booth out here doesn't mean a cattle farm, but it is related to it, sort of. It means a herdsman's shelter, and there were several of those in Pendle. The name lives on thanks to the parish names. Kicking things off, we have Roughlee Booth, which is within the Forest of Bowland, an area of outstanding natural beauty. It borders the parishes of Blacko, Barrowford, Old Lawn Booth, Goldshaw Booth and Barley with Wheatley Booth. The main settlement here is the village of Roughlee, but there are a couple of smaller hamlets such as Crowtrees and Thornley Home. As well as the obvious booth theme, these places will all have, over the next 2 weekends, another thing in common: witchcraft. You see, Pendle was an area that was supposedly rife with it at one time, and in Roughlee we'll come across a statue of one of the alleged Pendle witches, Alice Nutter, who met her end by being hanged in 1612, as did many others following the infamous Pendle witch hunt. Roughlee is otherwise a really beautiful place. So, come on Lancashire folks, let's dive back into your county and learn a bit more about its fabulous villages. We begin our journey through Roughlee Booth in the west of the parish, out in the countryside. Roughlee village is surrounded by some awesome Lancastrian scenery. It is, after all, just within the Forest of Bowland, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty. One of the things that sits out here is a small building that's not very well known, but it really should be. I'm talking about Clarion House. This has a really interesting backstory, and handily, it's got its own information board where you can learn about it. The word clarion literally means to proclaim loudly, and it's a fitting term for this building because it's the work of socialist pioneers who wanted to use it to spread their message as loudly as they could. It was part of a series of similar buildings across the area, but today Roughlee's Clarion House is the last one remaining. It was built by the Nelson Independent Labour Party in 1912. It was built to be a non-profit making cooperative with any excess money to be used in spreading the word of socialism. It was planned in the hope that others would take it as a model of how society as a whole ought to be organised. Visitors could come and witness how people were prepared to devote their lives to the Clarion movement for no personal gain. The Clarion's founders purposely chose a place of recognised natural beauty in the fervent hope that the rest of the world would come to resemble it, physically, morally and socially. The building project was funded by a loan of £350 from the Nelson Weavers Association. Today, the last Clarion House is open daily as a dog-friendly cafe for walkers and cyclists, and roaming YouTubers like myself, I guess. Let's drive into Roughlee now and talk a bit more about the beautiful area we're in. The Forest of Bowland is also known as the Bowland Fells and formerly the Chase of Bowland. It's an area of gritstone fells, deep valleys and peat moorland, mostly in northeast Lancashire, although there is a small part that falls within North Yorkshire too. It actually has 2 distinct separate parts. The majority of it is much further north than the bit we're in here. We're in what's known as the Forest of Pendle, separated from the main part of Bowland by the Ribble Valley. It's an ancient royal forest with its own separate history. Mind you, without question, this detached part has one of the best known features of Bowland, Pendle Hill, around which villages like Roughlee are located. Its summit is 1,827 feet above sea level, and it's the geographic feature that gives its name to the entire borough. Pendle Hill is famous for a few things, including some rather interesting myths and legends concerning the devil, but there are other things that were most definitely real. 3 events which took place close to it in the 17th century were the Pendle witch trials in 1612, Richard Townley's barometer experiment in 1661, and the vision of George Fox in 1652, which led to the foundation of the Quaker movement. Keep one of those things in mind, there's more to it shortly. Okay, so here we are then in Roughlee village, and this walk should take me no longer than about an hour. I don't think it's going to take me all that long. It's not the biggest parish in Pendle, this one, by any stretch of the imagination. Now, first of all, we're going to head for the village centre, which is just there. I'm parked here on Wood Close, ideal place to park because there's not a lot of parking elsewhere, let me tell you. Some narrow roads around here. Let's go and explore that to start with. First on the agenda in Roughlee is the village centre. This is a village hall, but it was never designed to be one originally. This was instead a cafe which sat on the edge of a boating lake. That watery feature still exists, and it's located behind it. The village centre is where local meetings are held, as well as a series of social events and private functions throughout the year. It can seat up to 80 people when it's full. The boating lake was once the lodge of Judson's Mill. It was a cotton spinning mill built in 1787, and its lake and pleasure gardens were a popular destination for day trips in the early 20th century. The mill was demolished in 1961, leaving behind the lake and the mill lodge, which became popular with trout fishermen. The mill changed hands several times. In 1880, it was sold to Richard Stuttard and contained 2,672 mule spindles and 42 power looms. In 1909, the mill was used as a laundry with some bleaching, and by 1912, the Nelson Corporation sold it to Alfred Wayne. It was empty by the 1940s and stood derelict for a long time before finally being demolished. Although the lake still exists, we can't really see it from here. We can, however, see another water feature at this point. This is Whitehoff Water, which this narrow lane follows westwards for a short time. You don't need to go far along here to find the next landmark. It's a statue of a woman who met a grisly end in 1612. Okay, so walk along the main road here in Roughlee and you'll soon come across one of the historic residents, shall we say, of this village in statue form. There you go. Now, who do you think that is? Let's find out. This rather forlorn looking woman depicted in chains is Alice Nutter. What a great name. In 2012, this statue of her was unveiled in Roughlee by a local celebrity, Bobby Elliott, the drummer with the band The Hollies. The statue was commissioned following a campaign led by a local councillor. The artist, David Palmer, researched local history and the fashion of Nutter's times to create the statue, which is made from steel and brass. It's a bit weather-worn now, but Alice has stood here for 13 years, watching the world go by. So who was Alice Nutter, and what's the deal with the chains? Alice was an alleged witch who was executed by way of hanging in 1612 following the Pendle witch trials. Unlike many accused of witchcraft, Alice was a member of a wealthy and noble family who owned land in Pendle, and many believe her execution was a huge miscarriage of justice. Nutter was accused of being present at a witches' coven on Good Friday in 1612, and later causing the death of a man named Henry Milton. Alice was likely a Catholic, and instead of being at a witches' coven, it's far more likely her movements on that day were to a secret Catholic service. Such meetings were illegal back then. It was a crime not to attend church and take communion. Since Alice was denied access to a lawyer at her trial and couldn't call any witnesses to defend her, the likelihood is that this poor woman chose to go to the gallows in silence rather than reveal the existence of her congregation and bring down upon them the king's witchfinder army. There were lots of others hanged on the same day as Alice. In all, the Pendle witch trials claimed the lives of 10 people out of 12 that were accused. The 12 accused lived in the area surrounding Pendle Hill and were charged with the murders of 10 people by the use of witchcraft. The number of witches hanged together, 9 at Lancaster and 1 in York, make the trials unusual for England. It has been estimated that all the English witch trials between the early 15th and early 18th centuries resulted in fewer than 500 executions. This series of trials accounts for more than 2% of that total. 6 of the Pendle witches came from one of 2 families, each at the time headed by a woman in her 80s. The outbreaks of witchcraft in and around Pendle may suggest that some people made a living as traditional healers using a mixture of herbal medicine and talismans or charms, which of course left them open to charges of sorcery. Many of the allegations resulted from accusations that members of the Demdike and Chattox families made against each other, perhaps because they were in competition trying to make a living from healing, begging and extortion. Alice was perhaps unfortunate to be caught up in it all. Okay, so when I was driving into Roughlee a few moments ago, I noticed there's a blue plaque on the houses that you've just seen. I had no idea what it was about until I actually read the thing. And this is quite interesting. This is to do with John Wesley, and we know a lot about this guy already, don't we, from various Methodist chapels around the country. It reads, John Wesley, founder of Methodism 1703 to 1791, 25th of August 1748. Whilst preaching near here in Roughlee, John Wesley was chased by a hostile mob taking refuge in Barrowford. A Methodist chapel was built behind these cottages in 1823, the graveyard of which can still be seen. Let's talk a bit more now about Whitehoff Water. It's part of the Pendle Water river system, which also includes Barley Water, Ogden Clough and Blacko Water. This is one of those streams that has several different names, depending on where you are. In Barley, its name is Barley Water, unsurprisingly. It becomes Whitehoff Water after it joins Ogden Clough, just below Barley. Then for a short stretch, as it passes through Roughlee, it becomes Roughlee Water, and that's this bit you're looking at now. After it's made its way through the village, it's then termed Pendle Water or Blacko Water, and it stays that way until it reaches the River Calder near Burnley. This stream might look a bit nondescript, but it was important to Burnley. After all, it once supplied water to the Burnley Water Treatment Works, situated on Wood End Lane. One of the best features of the stream in Roughlee is this amazing waterfall. I had to stop and admire this for a bit because I love the sound of rushing water. Brilliant, isn't it? Our next landmark is the local primary school. Roughly C of E was founded in 1852, and it has the motto, "Therefore choose," which comes from the Bible, more specifically, the book of Deuteronomy. Essentially, it's used to promote the idea that children should make good choices in their lives. The Friends of Roughlee School are a local group dedicated to raising funds and building a wider community for the children here. It runs various fundraising events throughout the school year, including a summer fair and the allegedly famous Ping Pong Plunge. So footways are very few and far between along the main street. You have to be very careful when traffic passes you because these roads are very, very narrow, as I said at the beginning of the video. And you can see here, there are no footpaths here. There's a lady walking a dog over there who's having to keep in right to the side to this white fence here because that's really the safest place to be. Now, speaking of footpaths, there is one off to the right, just at the end of that well, the end of the fence there where it bends to the left. We're going to take the footpath off to the right and it'll go around the back of everything we've seen so far, and it'll take us up towards a caravan site. So now we've turned around and we're heading back to the beginning. It's only a small village, this. Now, we could walk straight back down the road we've used so far to do that because Roughlee is a linear village. However, we have this second option, a footpath that crosses some fields and brings us out on a lane at the other side of the village centre. This is much more scenic. The footpath runs around the back of a campsite. That would be Pendle Valley Caravan Park. Landscaped and carefully laid out, this park is child-free, meaning any visit to it offers you total peace and tranquility with superb country views in all directions. Children are allowed to visit the caravan park though, but they must be kept under supervision according to its rules. Roughlee has more than one campsite. There's a second one called the Forest of Pendle Leisure Park, and that one's to the south of Whitehoff Water. It won the Best Kept Park Award in 2008. Okay, we are back on a road again. So basically what we've done there is we've walked from one end of Roughlee to the other via the back of that caravan park, and the caravan park is now on my right hand side, as you can see here, as we head down this lane. Now, we're not going to be heading down this lane for too long before we turn off again, because now we're heading towards a building that's got a connection to Alice Nutter. Now we're at the eastern end of Roughlee, and here we have Old Hall Close. This is named after Roughlee Old Hall, which can be seen from this small cul-de-sac. Roughlee Old Hall is one of the few Grade 2 listed buildings in the village, but arguably it's the one that's the best known. That's because this was, supposedly, Alice Nutter's home. There are theories that dispute that claim, but the building is definitely old enough for it to be right. It has a stone inscription attached to its gable, and although it's only partly legible, it reads, "This house was built by M.N. in the year of our Lord 1536. Alice was hanged in 1612, so the date checks out." Skeptics of the claim reckon Alice was more likely to have lived at Crow Trees, which was nearby, but even so, the legend of the Pendle Witches will forever be attached to this grand old property. The hall was built by the Smith family of Pendle and Briarcliff and later passed to the Hartleys. Alice Nutter was not related to any of those. Instead, the Nutters were distant relatives of the Whittaker family, and their ancestry is linked to Briarcliff, home in Cliviger, and Simonstone. Anyone with the Whittaker surname today will be a distant relative of Alice Nutter. Where the confusion seems to come in is within documents that show a link in land ownership between the Nutters and the hall, and that's resulted in folklore becoming mixed with fact. Either way, Alice would certainly have known Roughlee, so her statue here isn't out of place. Okay, we are almost all the way around Roughlee. We've got one last landmark to talk about, and it's there, in shot right now. That is the Bay Horse Pub. Our last landmark in Roughlee is the Bay Horse Pub. In 2017, it was the subject of a campaign to save it from developers after a fire in its kitchen. Villagers and others raised almost £500,000 to save it, and that attracted local and national media coverage. They managed to raise this astronomical sum in just 4 months, an absolutely incredible feat. So we have just one job left to do before we leave Roughlee behind. You've just seen the parish notice board in that last shot. Now normally I leave one of these cards on parish notice boards to mark that I've actually been to a place. I don't need to do that here because next to the board, as you can see here, there's a little box that says, can you leave leaflets for notice board here? Well, it's not a leaflet, it's a card, but hopefully the same thing happens to this as would happen to any leaflets that get left in there. So hopefully anybody watching this will put this card in that notice board at some point. There we go. Cheers, Roughlee. It's been a pleasure. With one booth complete, we'd better make our way to the next one. In the next one, we'll be talking a lot less about the Pendle Witches, but don't worry, they will return more next weekend. The next booth is one that features 2 villages, a couple of pubs, and a type of church, which the channel has, as far as I know, not yet seen. See you tomorrow. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.